Hello, dear listener. Please subscribe to our channel and enjoy watching. One evening, I was walking through a dark park after meeting a friend. Scott and I would occasionally hang out at a bar to unwind. The bar wasn't too far from home, and you could walk there. But to make the journey a bit shorter, you had to go through the park, where all sorts of rowdy young troublemakers would gather in the dark, often fueled by alcohol and weed, or worse. But I knew how to stand up for myself, no matter what state I was in, so they were never a hurdle for me, and they never bothered me, perhaps because I cut an imposing figure. On that evening, I decided to take the shortcut through the park again, and I was strolling home, completely lost in some bizarre thoughts that had crept into my mind under the influence of alcohol. I was only looking down at my feet, trying to make out the path in the darkness, stepping over small puddles and squishing through wet leaves after a heavy daytime rain. My philosophical ponderings were interrupted by a scream not far from me. I listened closely, and indeed a girl was screaming and calling for help. The dormant hero in me veered off my path and headed in the direction of the sounds. I didn't have long to walk, and beyond the next alleyway near a tree, I noticed a few people. 2 guys and the girl who had gotten into trouble. I shouted to them from a distance, hoping that they would be frightened of the uninvited witnesses and go away. But they didn't seem to care about me or anyone else. 2 young men decided to show what kind of bullies they are in front of a weak, defenseless girl. When I realized they weren't going to back down, I ran right up to them and gave them a good thrashing on their face and sides, remembering my army training. The 2 bodies were panting in front of me like 2 punching bags. It seems that they were brave only in front of the girls, and when they realized that they had a tough opponent, they left that place at breakneck speed. I turned to the frightened girl, who was looking at me with wide eyes and still trembling. Looking at her, I remembered how many years ago I had met my wife April in a similar way. She was walking home late from work, and a group of intoxicated individuals was bothering her. Fortunately, I was also walking through the park and helped her get rid of the troublemakers. I walked April home, struck up a conversation with her, and found her to be charming and friendly. That's how our romance began, with an invitation for coffee, and eventually we got married. I always asked her not to walk through the park late at night. When we had our first son, she quit her job and focused on taking care of the child in our home. A couple of years ago, she made me happy again by giving me another son. As these memories flashed before my eyes, the girl I had saved started to regain her composure and began to speak, her voice still trembling a bit. "Oh, you're like a guardian angel. Those jerks. Oh, I'm so grateful you appeared just in time." "You appeared just in time?" "It's nothing," I replied. "Are you okay?" "Yes, but can I somehow thank you for saving me?" Looking at her revealing attire, I had an idea of what she might be implying, but I had no interest. I was fully committed to my wife, and it was just nice to do a good deed. "I can drive you to the bus stop. I wouldn't recommend walking through this park at all." "Still, let's go. It's getting late." I didn't explain anything further and escorted her to the bus stop, far away from the ill-fated park. While waiting for her to get on the bus, I heard a lot of irrelevant information from her. But amidst all of that, she introduced herself as Isabel. And then I came home, and my dream was to collapse on the couch. And I don't want anyone else bothering me. The children were long since asleep, and my wife was doing some needlework in the living room with a small basket of various knitting threads beside her. "How did the evening go?" "Did you celebrate the purchase?" she asked when I entered the house. "Yeah, we did. We hung out for a bit. He's quite happy with it. He won't need to commute to work on the subway anymore." "And how are you holding up? Did you miss me?" I approached her and kissed her on the forehead. "Oh no, I had a very eventful day. The neighbor told me that they're moving to another city next week. Her husband got a job transfer, so they're relocating." "Oh, that's nice. New places, new experiences." "Yes, but now I'll have to figure out who to ask to babysit the kids when I need help. There are no suitable candidates on our street anymore. Mrs. Barbara is getting too old. And the Galtons." She pursed her lips. "You know, Sarah's definitely not cut out for childcare." "Don't worry, we'll figure something out." maybe you shouldn't go back to work just yet. Have you thought about it? I can provide for all of us just fine. April put down her knitting and sighed heavily. Jordan, we've talked about this recently. I'm a bit tired of staying at home all day. It's the same routine every day. I need a change of scenery, even if it's just part-time. But not to be stuck within these walls all the time. Don't you have conversations with your friends? And we go for walks together often. April, this melancholy of yours will pass. The doctor said it's common after childbirth. And we've already had 2. How about we go somewhere and take a break for a week? I'll arrange it with work, and we can take the babies to my parents. But why are you so against me going back to work? I just don't understand your concern. April, I just don't want you to get too exhausted. I understand that it's not easy to maintain order at home and take care of 2 children. This is why I'm concerned. She sat in silence for a few seconds as if pondering, and then suggested that we go to bed, as it was getting quite late. A few days later, I was on my way to work and stopped by a souvenir shop. I wanted to get a small gift for my wife to brighten her day. Near the shop, I noticed a familiar figure and approaching closer, recognized the young woman I had recently saved from attackers. It struck me as strange that she was standing there, handing out leaflets, considering that she had told me she worked as a cashier at a supermarket on the adjacent street. Isabel, is that you? Oh. She turned around and smiled widely. My savior, I didn't expect to see you again. Or rather, well, not in that sense. I just thought it would be great to see you again, and maybe it's not my place, but aren't you supposed to be at work at this time? Well, you see, things didn't work out with the store. I had a little disagreement with the manager, and now I'm here. But it's not a bad part-time job. They pay every day, and I closely examined the girl in the daylight. This time, she was dressed quite decently and not as heavily made up. At that moment, her only fault seemed to be her overly chatty nature, but perhaps she just lacked social interaction. Tell me, Isabel, how do you get along with children? With children? What does that have to do with anything? Why do you ask? So how's it going? Well, I'm fine with them. I have 2 younger brothers. My mom always left me with them and sometimes even made me babysit them. I had to do a lot, change diapers, feed them from a bottle, and when they got a bit older and stopped crying for no reason, I even came up with games for them. But I still don't understand why you're asking about my experience with children. And besides that, have you worked as a babysitter before? Well, not really. Although a couple of times, I had to babysit a neighbor's child when their parents were going out for some event. But that was a while ago, and I haven't done it since. While she was talking, I considered her as a potential nanny to make life a bit easier for my wife. If everything went well, maybe this girl could stay as our nanny. After my wife had confided in me about how difficult it was for her to stay at home all the time, I had thought a couple of times about hiring a nanny to help April. This girl was currently unemployed, and for some reason, I felt like helping her. Maybe it was because I still had some impressions from that fateful evening. Or maybe she had now created a good impression with her chattiness. I talked to Isabel about the potential job, and she readily agreed, especially since she lived quite nearby. We agreed that she would start in a couple of days. I took her phone number to call her after discussing it with my wife. Halloween was coming up in a couple of days, and April was looking for something different to do. She was decorating the house and going over recipes for homemade baked goods and sweets to treat the children who would be knocking on our door in fancy costumes. I told my wife that I had found a candidate for the babysitting job, and to my surprise, April agreed right away. I didn't even have to explain anything to her. My wife only asked if the girl could be trusted, and if she was not sick with anything. I told her that she seemed pretty shy the last time I talked to her. I also shared the adventure I had with this girl in the park, knowing that my wife would find out anyway. I didn't want to seem like I was hiding anything from her. Later, I called Isabel, and she said she could start working in 2 days, which happened to be Halloween. This suited me just fine, and I hurried to let my wife know that she would soon have some help. April, I invited Scott over for the holiday. Are you okay with him joining us? What's he gonna do alone at home? Plus, he promised to bring lots of candies and cookies, I said. Why should I be against it? He's your friend, and he's been here before. Let him come. I'll prepare another plate. You said he's still not married, so maybe he'll get to know the future nanny, and something might develop between them, April replied. Oh, since when did you become a matchmaker? I joked. Scott is the kind of guy who values his freedom. Besides, you remember that his last relationship ended quite tragically. But your idea's not bad. Maybe you're right. Let them meet, and we'll see how it goes. My main concern is that she's good with the kids, and the rest is secondary. Yes, Jordan, you're right. Oh, it seems like Kevin is crying. I'll go check on him. April came out and went to the nursery after hearing our youngest son whimpering on the babysitter's radio. I turned on the TV to watch the news and was content with the fact that things were shaping up pretty well. On the evening of the holiday, Scott was running late. Everything was ready at home, and we were waiting for him and Isabel. The baby was in the living room in his playpen, while the older child was running around in a pirate costume, asking for more candy. When the doorbell rang, April went to answer it, thinking it was just another group of children. But when she opened the door, she found a young woman wearing a red cape with a huge hood covering her head. She didn't ask for candy like the other kids, but greeted us and asked if she could come in. Who are you and what do you want, actually? April asked. Isn't that Isabel? I recognized her under the hood when I looked out into the hallway after my wife. Hello, Isabel. Quite an entrance. Come in. We've been waiting a long time. Nice outfit. Yes, it's Halloween, so I thought I'd get into the spirit, she said shyly. The girl hesitantly stepped into the house, and after taking off her hood, she looked around. We invited her to the living room to see our children. April wanted to see how Isabel would interact with them. That one greeted our son sweetly and immediately kept them busy with chatter. It seems like she's doing well, my wife commented while observing her behavior as we stepped aside. But that's not enough. Let's see how she does for one more day with them. I need to observe. I have to be sure that my children are in good hands. Everything will be fine. You'll see, I have a good feeling about this, I reassured her. Oh, what are you whispering about here? Isabel suddenly approached us. Jordan, April, I wanted to ask you something. I hope you won't mind. She hesitantly lowered her head. Go on and tell us. What are you thinking? April asked. Well, it's just that it's a holiday today. I told you I have 2 younger brothers. But I didn't get a chance to mention that I also have an older brother. The little ones are in Europe with our parents for a few months. Chris and I are here all alone. So I invited him. Can he join us for the celebration? He's alone at home, and he doesn't even have a girlfriend. Isabel looked at us with such pleading eyes that I couldn't refuse her request, and I didn't see anything wrong with having another guest for dinner on this evening. I even thought it might make the evening more enjoyable. So I allowed it. Isabel exclaimed happily and went around the corner to call her brother. Scott arrived a little later, carrying a bag of sweets, which April immediately placed on a high table so our children wouldn't see it and ask for sweets before dinner. About half an hour later, Chris arrived, who had been eagerly awaited by Isabel. She had spotted him through the window and offered to go and open the door, especially since I, April, and Scott had started an interesting conversation. We fell silent briefly to allow Isabel to introduce her brother to us, and soon she led him into the living room. Meet my brother Chris, she said cheerfully. What? You? April exclaimed, her voice filled with sudden excitement. She turned pale, then blushed, and trembling with nervousness, she rushed out of the living room. I couldn't understand what had upset her so much. I hurried after her, concerned about her well-being, apologizing to the guests on the way. When I caught up with my wife, she was sitting in the kitchen, staring at one point like an asylum patient, swaying in the same way. I realized that she recognized the young man. But why was she so upset by his appearance? What was her connection to him? This was the first part of an intriguing story. The next part will be in the next clip, today. Now let's hear the story of a man who decided to marry a Filipina. And this is what happened. During a trip to the Philippines, I met a lovely woman. She was 23, I was 35, and we had an instant connection. I am an American, by the way. She was the perfect, traditional woman, cooking, cleaning, and doing everything that you wouldn't normally expect from a Western woman. She adored me. Over the course of 3 years, I made multiple trips to the Philippines and truly believed I had found my future wife. She came from a humble family, living in a rural area on a dirt road 10 kilometers outside of the city. They were not religious, just good, down-to-earth people. I had always dreamed of marrying a traditional woman. I feel that feminism and Western culture make it difficult to find a loyal, decent wife here in the States. That's why I was drawn to Filipino women. I married my wife 3 years after meeting her. There were no red flags. She had just completed her nursing degree in the Philippines, and I had covered most of her tuition costs during her 3 years of nursing school. Once she came to the States, she would be making good money. I work at the DMV, so I don't make a lot of money, even though she will earn more than me when she arrives. While she was in the Philippines, I paid for her apartment, helped her family financially, and paid for our wedding. When I returned to the US, I applied for a spousal visa for my wife while she was still in the Philippines. After her interview at the US Embassy in her home country, they issued her an immigrant visa that was valid for a year. Once she arrived in the US, we spent 4 years going back and forth to secure her 10-year green card. The whole process was complicated, time-consuming, and expensive. During those 4 years, she took her nursing exam, passed it, and we had a daughter. Since she was earning more than me, I decided to be a stay-at-home dad for our daughter. I did some part-time work and a few side jobs, but she was the one bringing home the money. In those 4 years, she was an amazing wife. I didn't see any warning signs, and we didn't have any major marital problems during her visa process. However, I did start to notice that she was becoming more accustomed to the American lifestyle. It didn't become obvious until she received her 10-year green card. She knew that once she had that card, the only way I could send her back to her home country was if she committed a serious crime. After she got her green card, it seemed like she checked out of our marriage. She loved her new life, the independence and the freedom. It didn't feel like we were growing apart. It felt like we were being pushed apart. She became distant, occasionally harsh, and always seemed to find a reason to be out of the house. The isolation from the pandemic only exacerbated these issues. The pandemic didn't help. I know she looks at life in the US and thinks it's dull. We don't go anywhere or see anyone, and it's a terrible place to live. She doesn't realize that the pandemic lockdown would be much worse in her home country. About 6 months ago, I noticed a shift. She started telling little white lies and going out with coworkers after hours. Suddenly, her phone, paycheck, bank account, and everything else were off limits to me. I tried talking to her, asking if she wanted something different or if we needed to make changes. I even went to marriage counseling with her, although she wasn't too thrilled about it. But it was clear that she wasn't committed to anything other than finding her own happiness. I asked the counselor to spend more time with me, but for some reason, she blew me off. That's a separate issue I'll deal with later. She stopped wearing her wedding ring 6 months ago. I gave her a list of expectations, such as wearing her ring, not driving drunk, and letting me know where she was going, but she completely ignored it. That's when I realized that if I caught her lying again, it would be the final straw. I told her I knew she was keeping secrets, and she needed to come clean. I called her out on some of the lies, but she just denied everything and basically shut down. The lies kept getting bigger and more frequent, but she still managed to deny them until last month, when she got caught up in her own web of lies. I pushed her for the truth, and after an hour she finally admitted it. She had a secret Tinder account and had been seeing multiple guys she met on there. I have a pretty good idea of what she was up to. She would call out sick from work, but then drive to the office, park, and take an Uber to see her side guys. She did this multiple times. She would text me saying she was at a work party, but she was actually at some guy's place all night. She would also text me saying she was too drunk to drive and would crash there. On her days off, she would say she was going shopping, but she was actually sneaking off to some guy's apartment. This happened multiple times. She even met up with these guys in her work parking lot. The problem is, I didn't figure all of this out until it was too late. When I confronted her for the truth last month, she only admitted to about 10% of it. Her response was, "I've told you enough," and she's still lying about these things. She's not just a cheater, she's a full-blown liar. I know for a fact that she met up with her Tinder flings at least 23 times, with at least 11 different guys, but she only admits to seeing 4 of them. It took about 2 weeks for all of this to come out, and with each passing day my pain, stress, sadness, and anger just kept growing. It's been 6 weeks since she confessed, and I'm still only sleeping about 3 hours a night. I have a pretty good understanding of what she was up to. Our little girl is absolutely lovely and full of joy. She's at an age where she turns everything into a fun game or a wild adventure. She really should have both parents there to keep up with her. Guide her growth, and share in the joy of her childhood. But her mom has been missing in action for at least 6 days a week, putting her own desires above everything else. Our girl is really starting to feel the effects. Every day she asks, "Where's mommy?" I want to play with her. "Is mommy gonna tuck me in tonight?" And she's starting to act out, desperate for attention. It's totally unacceptable that my wife is squandering these precious years of our daughter's life. She has done irreversible harm to our family. I am the one at home all day, every day, looking after our daughter, while my wife works and has her secret life. Any free time my wife should have spent with our daughter, she instead spent out and about fooling around with random guys and seeking her own pleasure while I was at home, meeting our toddler's every need. The pandemic had us cooped up in the house for 6 months, with our only outings being neighborhood strolls and my solo grocery store runs every 10 days to avoid COVID exposure. My daughter is my #1 concern all this time while I have had a toddler hanging on me. I couldn't keep tabs on my wife's nighttime activities, and I couldn't even consider having an affair myself, even if I wanted to. My wife took advantage of the fact that I was tied down at home, so she could have her alone time and mess around. She totally disregarded our daughter's needs, instead focusing on her own desires every chance she got. And she did all of this in the middle of a pandemic. She is a nurse, so she knows the risks. She put our family in danger, including our little girl, by sleeping around with different men, while health experts are advising us to limit contact with people outside our household. She won't talk about what was going through her head when she was leaving our daughter alone and making choices that put us at a high risk for COVID-19. She clearly doesn't have a motherly bone in her body, showing no regard for our daughter's health and welfare. 3 days after my wife confessed to the basics of her actions, I got in touch with a divorce lawyer. She will be served the papers within a week in September 2020. My wife has no idea what's coming. In her eyes, I have been a picture-perfect husband for the past 5 weeks. She hasn't shown any guilt, regret, or remorse for wrecking me, our marriage, and our daughter's life. In fact, she probably thinks I am begging for forgiveness since I have been trying to cater to her every need and pamper her. She has mentioned a few times, "I'm hurting, I'm trying to hold it together," but she is still the same, hiding, lying, and striving for independence. You live and learn, I guess. I feel taken advantage of. She has her green card, she will benefit from our marriage. She still has her roster of Tinder flings. Soon, she will have the absolute freedom she has always wanted. But there is no way in hell I am letting my daughter be raised by her. Heads up, I have been jotting down everything in a journal since the end of March. It's just a text file, but it's now up to 350 kilobytes. And I have recorded everything. I also keep extra copies just in case. Her green card is good for 10 years, and trust me, I know that INS announced this thing. I planned, applied, and completed all the immigration paperwork, so we would be set for a lifetime here in the US. She's not gonna lose her green card, which is a relief unless she commits a serious crime. A US immigrant visa means I promised the US government to pay back the government for any public benefits she receives for basically a decade. I signed that with my eyes wide open, I never thought otherwise, and I'm fine with that. The money I would have spent on health insurance, Beauty products, clothes, and other things, if we had stayed married, would probably cost more. My lawyer and I have already put together the divorce papers, pointing out my wife's constant absence and her lack of interest in our daughter's well-being. We even have written statements from friends and neighbors who have seen me being the round-the-clock parent. So, fingers crossed, that should give me an advantage in the custody battle. The draft papers already request the court to rule that I keep our daughter's passports, that my wife can't take her out of the country, and that she needs my approval to get new passports for our daughter. Got that covered. My daughter is my #1 concern, and if it comes down to paying hefty spousal support or getting custody of my child, I'll happily make that deal. Although my wife doesn't know that, I've looked over the 180 stuff, not really understanding what it's all about unless it's to help fix things. I'll review it again, but this time with the goal of distancing myself. I believe I'm already pretty far into the points. And for the past 5 weeks, I've been playing the perfect husband. But fixing things isn't happening. There's no way. I'm going to be the guy whose wife is messing around with a ton of Tinder dudes every month. She's dead set against promising that she'll stop doing it. So there's no point in asking for a timeline or writing no contact letters. Divorce is happening, and that's that. She might react badly when she finds out about the divorce, but my lawyer and I are prepared. Her go-to move when I try to talk things out is to shut down, but if she switches it up with crying and begging for another chance, I won't give in. She made her bed, there's no going back now. 2 things I need to do after reading posts here. Set up a doctor's appointment for a full checkup, including testing for STDs. We were intimate not often, but during the months she was with other guys, I had no idea, and I need something to help me sleep. I'll grab a voice-activated recorder on my next grocery run. Update: my attorney and I make a good team, and I trust his experience and guidance. But I'm torn between following my gut and taking his advice. I was all set to tell my wife's family about the divorce when she received the papers. Her parents live in her home country. I told my lawyer about my plan, and he advised against it. We don't want to appear like we're working together and ruin any chances of fixing things. I understand that, but if anyone can talk some sense into my wife, it's her parents. We spent 3 years together. After spending 3 years living in her home country, we tied the knot. It was only a short 10-mile drive from her mom, dad, brother, and sisters. I really love her family, and they were one of the main reasons I chose to marry her. I also feel like they respect me. They have expressed their appreciation for me many times and have welcomed me into their world. However, they will not be happy when they find out what she has been up to. I have been in a similar situation before, when my wife crossed the line, and her family quickly set her straight. They made it clear that bringing shame to the family is not acceptable. Family always comes first in their culture, and I was grateful to be a part of that. The divorce papers will be delivered next week, and I have already signed them. I am just waiting for a statement from a friend who can vouch for my bond with my daughter. I need to make a decision in the next few days. Should I tell her family now, or wait until the divorce is finalized in 4 or 5 months, as my lawyer suggests, so it doesn't complicate negotiations? If I wait, she probably won't tell them right away either, although she won't be able to keep it a secret for long. When she was caught, she told a few of her friends that I cheated on her. But the truth is much worse. She was on Tinder, hooking up with at least a dozen random men, sneaking off to their places while she was supposed to be working. This left me to take care of our daughter around the clock when she could have been there. And she did all of this during a pandemic. Her family deserves to know the whole truth, even though they will be furious. For me, the best outcome would be if she decided to go back to her home country, leaving me and my daughter in peace, and allowing me to raise her with real family values. I don't know if she would agree to that, but I need to have some leverage. My lawyer is right. If I tell her family now, she won't have a reason to go back to her home country to face the consequences. Update: I can imagine people reacting the same way I did when I found out about all of this. I highly doubt my wife told them more than 10% of the truth. When she first admitted to meeting one man from Tinder, I didn't know about the rest. I asked her if they used protection, my first thought being STDs, but there were also other risky behaviors involved, like COVID. She said they, but how could I verify that? And it would be naive to think she used any kind of protection during oral sex. Even if she did use protection briefly, I am not fooling myself. Then I found out about all the other men. She also claimed she wore a face mask when she first met them, thinking this would show how careful she was about our health, including our daughters. But I know for a fact she is not telling the truth. There is no point in questioning her about these things. She will just continue to lie. The reality is already clear. She was out doing all this for at least 3 months. Every single free moment outside of work, both scheduled and unscheduled time off, was spent chasing after men while I was at home with our daughter all day, every day. She should have been here with our little girl. She should have stepped up and been a mom, not absent from our kid's life. Heck, she should have been a wife. Like I said before, she's a nurse, she works in healthcare, she knows better. She should have done everything she could to shield us from the risk of COVID. Nope, there's zero chance. I'm thinking about getting back together. The divorce paperwork is all ready, just waiting on one more statement from a witness, someone who can speak to how much I'm there for my daughter. My lawyer tells me we should be all set to serve her the papers next week. As for the whole 180 thing, I've got all my ducks in a row for this divorce. She doesn't have a clue about what's about to hit her. We haven't touched the big bad issue for over a month because she flat out refuses to have that conversation. Naturally, I wanted to know all the gritty details: how, when, why, who, where. I guess that's the usual response when you find out your wife's been messing around, but she's done nothing but lie, manipulate, shift the blame, and completely shut down. I tried talking to her for a couple of days, but she basically said stop asking questions or I'm out of here. I never had reconciliation on the table. I just wanted to understand why she blew up our marriage and set our daughter up for a world of hurt. But for the past month and a half, I haven't brought it up. There's no point, it's over, and she's got to deal with what comes next. We don't chat about that stuff, but we do talk about everyday life, what I'm making for dinner. Yeah, I'm the one keeping the home fires burning while she's out working or whatever. What our daughter got up to today, when she's due for her next bath, and so on. I've checked out. I'm already looking forward to the divorce papers. They will hopefully instruct her to pack her bags in 6 weeks' time, which feels like a lifetime to me, but the court wants us to be reasonable. Unfortunately, because we share a child, my soon-to-be ex is going to be a part of my life for a while yet. I'd prefer if she just vanished. So, my previous post, the one where I was asking, when should I spill the beans to her family, was just me looking for some input and advice based on other people's experiences. Her family, who all live back in her home country, are going to flip their lids when they hear about this. Should I lay it all out for them next week when she gets served? Or should I hold off, like my attorney is suggesting? Of course, that question doesn't impact the divorce if it gets to court. But I think the best outcome I can get in the divorce is through negotiation. My dream outcome is that my wife simply returns to her country and leaves me and my daughter in peace. My lawyer says if I burn her bridges in her home country, she might have no reason to go back. If her parents will put her in the firing squad, the court will never order her to leave the US. They will give her spousal support, child custody rights, hopefully at 50%, order me to pay for her apartment, etc. The best outcome for me is to negotiate the divorce, and my attorney advises me to keep things fair and not come across as mean. However, I also want her family to know the truth, which she won't tell them. Some people have asked me if she was getting paid for all of this, but that thought didn't even cross my mind until now. I have no idea, because she keeps her bank account under tight control. I haven't seen her with any extra money, but I know she's good at hiding things, probably at her job. In any case, it wouldn't make much of a difference except maybe increasing the risk of STDs. I brought it up with my lawyer, and he didn't think it would have much impact either. I live in a state where the reason for divorce doesn't matter, and accepting money from someone isn't a crime in itself. However, if I could prove that she was selling herself, it would greatly benefit me in gaining full custody of our daughter. But for now, I have no evidence to support that. And yes, I would like to understand why she did it. Before we got married, we talked about many things, including her ambitions, our life together, her dreams, and my support for her. I also made it clear that if she ever cheated, I would leave, or rather, she would have to leave. She remembers that conversation, I'm sure. Maybe this is her way of dramatically asking for a divorce. If that's the case, she certainly made her point. But it would have been much easier if she had just told me she wanted out. Or maybe she was enticed by the freedom of living in the US and lost control, combined with the struggle of adapting to a new culture, being away from family, trying to fit in, and dealing with her emotions. It seems like she couldn't handle the pressure. I have spent a significant portion of my life overseas, so I understand the feeling of culture shock. I was always there for her, helping her through the ups and downs of moving halfway across the world. But now, all of that means nothing, considering she has crossed boundaries numerous times. I have tried to understand the reasons behind her actions, but I won't dig any further. In the first few days after she dropped the bomb, I tried to get her to explain, but she refused to be honest. If she can't be honest with herself, how can she be honest with me? Let's be clear, our marriage is over. The divorce papers will be served to her next week. I understand I'm not the first person to be deceived like this. I have read about scams from her country, and I have even witnessed some firsthand, so I know to always be cautious. The thing is, we met in person, not online. I don't even have social media accounts. I thought our story was unique, and we had a strong foundation. I travel for the adventure, and I have never taken advantage of women. She shared a lot about her family, and after just 1 week of knowing her, I decided to take a trip to her hometown. This involved a 20-hour journey by ferry and bus, so it was not a small decision. A small decision. What I'm trying to say is that I didn't see any signs of a scam in her. After we tied the knot, we lived in her country for 3 years while I commuted back and forth to the US. My radar was on, but I didn't have any suspicions, and I consciously decided that moving to the US was the best for our relationship. And then everything fell apart. Finally, I got a tele-appointment with my doctor, no in-person visits due to the pandemic. I got tested for all possible STDs. It seems my wife at least made one good decision. She picked guys who were disease-free. All my tests came back negative, and there's no sign of COVID in me or our daughter yet, despite my wife's reckless behavior. I got some sleep aids, and for the past 3 nights I've actually managed to sleep more than 3 hours. We're still in the early stages of the divorce, working on all the paperwork. There always seems to be something that adds a delay of a day or 3. We're waiting on a statement from a family friend to back up my capabilities as a dad. I'm pretty confident the divorce filing will make its way to the court next week, and then my wife will get the papers. My attorney suggested I pack a get-out-quick bag for me and my little girl. He's seen plenty of situations where the shock of getting served makes the other spouse flip out. My wife has all next week off, so she'll be at home to receive the papers. I suppose that's one upside to her schedule change. If things go south, I'm prepared to make a quick exit with my daughter and head to a motel. I really have no idea how she's gonna react, but so far she hasn't shown any signs of facing the truth or understanding the repercussions of her actions. I'd be relieved if she just packed her bags and left. I'm asking the court to order her to be out by November 1st. But as my lawyer points out, it's the judge's call in the end. I've laid out my case, and I've set up some counseling sessions through my doctor. I'm in serious need of someone to talk to. That's another downside of this pandemic. I haven't hung out with anyone in over half a year, and I don't have any close friends around. This has been hard on my daughter too, but she's so young that she doesn't understand what normal life is supposed to be. In my opinion, I really sympathize with the author of this post. It sounds like this guy was taken advantage of. How can you be so naive? First of all, the Philippines is a very loose relationship. Secondly, most Filipinas sell their bodies to survive. It's a way for them to get out of poverty and escape this backward society. And this guy not only solved all the migration problems of his wife, but also gave her the opportunity to earn good money in the USA. So I don't think he should be under any illusions about her family. They'll be on their daughter's side anyway. If you enjoyed this story, please like and leave a comment. It's important for us and will help promote this video. Thank you for watching us.